do we introduce ourselves? Because
We
like I don't
will.
know either of these guys, and one appears to be a cartoon of like a communist.
Joseph Stalin is who
Joseph
I am.
Stalin. You're
Yeah.
Joseph Stalin.
Well,
Come back from the.
a younger Joseph Stalin.
Well, so you're really
Wow.
hot, basically.
Wow.
He was quite
that's
attractive,
why-
actually. I
that's before you
Joseph
killed all
Stalin
the-
was
That's before
the
you killed all-
hottest, young dictator ever.
Really
Like,
true.
no one,
I mean,
no
I'm
one.
not sure that I
equals his
appreciate the term dictator, but otherwise I tend to agree.
Oh my god.
We'll get into it. We'll get into it as we go.
Didn't-
Gang,
He didn't speak with a British accent either.
welcome,
I don't
welcome.
think I'm British. Well, close.
If I
sort
may.
of.
If
Yeah,
I
go
may.
ahead. Sorry. Okay.
No, it's all good.
I'm actually Indonesian, but unfortunately, half of me is from the colony known as Australia, the occupied lands.
I can hear the Australian in there.
Just
The occupied
just
land.
A tad, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be agreeing with a tankie, but we do have to abolish Australia.
Well, I totally
That's
agree.
what
I mean,
That's in
If there
the
is
United
one-
States national security interests. I agree with that.
Australia must go.
yes, I agree completely. I don't know, but it's in the United States security interests or national security interests to maintain it. One of the largest outposts is Australia. I mean, Pine Gap is where they run
Oh.
half of their atrocities out of. So anyway,
Do you think
I'm
Kylie
sure-
Minogue and Danny Minogue are colonial sympathizers?
I don't know. They're white people. I don't really care what they've got to say. No, I'm joking. I actually,
Wait,
I
Australia.
don't know too much about them.
Yeah,
I'm a bit
You're a
young for that.
fan. You're a fan. You sing all of it. Step back in time. Locomotion. I know you.
Like
I think you're a little bit older
Stalin
than I am.
genocided
A little
the
bit.
Tatars, but Australia genocided the rabbits. And like,
Oh.
sorry, Tatars, but rabbits cuter.
I think Australia also genocided the indigenous population, which is a little bit worse than the rabbits. But hey,
Well, rabbits
No,
though.
that was a
that
really
is
big
a
rabbit
that
thing.
is a debate,
Humans,
perhaps.
rabbits.
That is a debate for another day. Welcome,
Okay.
welcome, one and all, to yet
Thank you.
another episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, just real quick. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, I've gathered a force, okay? I've gathered a team to discuss the incidents recently involving piracy perpetrated by the Houthis. We're going to talk about Yemen today a little bit. We're also going to be talking about the left and right response to all of this that's happening. We're going to get into the weeds, I am sure, but I also want to kind of keep it a little bit general in how we view resistance and what that entails. Are there limits to it? All these things. But before we do, I wanted to give everyone here a chance to introduce themselves, to say hi, to maybe, roll their shoulders a bit, loosen up, and we can get into it. Mr. TankieCharacteristics, is that how you want to be referred to, by the way? Like, is there a shorter name?
I do have. Well, my alter ego is Dick Drain, if that's less of a mouthful. So you could go with that if you like.
Well, I don't know if I could just call you Tanky the whole time. Would that be okay?
Yeah, well, or maybe just characteristics. Might be a bit nicer.
Well,
All right,
I
all
mean,
right.
Tanky's got a bit of a negative sort of connotation.
Just call him Joe.
Joe.
Well, yeah, you could call me Joe.
Just call him
That's
Joe.
fine.
Okay, Joe works. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Joe. What are your thoughts here?
Oh, sure. I mean, well, I'm a anonymous Twitter tanky with an account with a 1-month-old account. So I got to say, I feel quite privileged to be invited onto the show. As far as who I am personally, well, I am someone who has connections to the global south on my father's side, so I feel quite strongly about anti-imperialism, particularly as I'm half Indonesian, and we did suffer at the hands of the illustrious CIA. So, I mean, on top of that, I just generally have a lot of solidarity with the global south. I think that once you educate yourself on what is going on, it's kind of irrelevant whether you're you know, whether you're European, American, white, once you really understand it, I think that most human beings would certainly side with the oppressed in this sort of movement, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, was there anything else? Is that enough?
That'll work. That'll get us started. Thanks for being here.
Wicked.
Really appreciate
Bye,
you and
Noah.
looking forward to what you have to say. Next up, we have no stranger to the channel, Omar. How are you?
Oh, how you doing?
Oh, you're cutting out. Your mic's
Can't hear
there.
you.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, we can
No.
hear that. Yeah.
Hear me
but
good?
You
Yeah.
cut in and out though, is the issue. Okay, while he's fixing that, Brianna, hi.
Wick, it's been a really long time. I'm Brianna Wu. Y'all know who I am. You know, and just before we get into this topic, you know, Wick, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I was radically against the Iraq War. You know, my home state of Mississippi had more people serving per capita. I had friends die in that war. I was 100% opposed to Bush. I am not someone who is blind to the dangers of American imperialism, and I'm not someone that's instinctively anti-war, I'm pro-war. At the same time, like the discussion that has been going on lately is mind-blowing. When you can take someone who was a textbook like far left radical in the Bush years and have the exact same positions on literally everything, and I'm suddenly like a moderate when it comes to this stuff, that's really scary. This discussion on this is extreme. It is anti-American. It is threatening to inflame the, you know, the Saudi-Iran Cold War that's going on. It's tremendously disturbing. And I really hope today we can just have an open discussion, really focus on the issues here, and hopefully people can understand that the left is playing with some really dangerous ideas.
Oh, hello.
Okay, Omar,
Hi.
we can hear you now. Give it a
Omar, how
shot.
you doing?
Also, Brianna,
All
thank
right.
you again for being here. It's been
Of
a whole
course.
year. So, okay. Omar, go
Hey
ahead.
guys. Okay. First of all, I want
Mars cutting in and out.
Yeah,
here.
your mic's cutting in and out. I don't know if it's your noise
man.
gate or your suppression gate, but okay.
to about now.
Again, it keeps cutting in and out.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Okay.
Oh, Omar's
Just to,
totally nerfed. He's just silent here.
Try turning everything on and off, you know, standard response. First tech support go
Gotta
to.
turn everything on.
Honestly,
Could be
it
the
usually works.
CIA. The CIA doesn't hear
silenced them.
what Omar has to say.
I wish I could turn the CIA off. Can I just ask briefly, Brianna, you said that you're anti-imperialist, yet you seem to take issue with anti-Americanness, I suppose, would be how to word it. How do you reconcile those two positions?
I think the United States, generally speaking, is on the side of geostability. I think we've made some extremely bad decisions, Iraq being a really good example. But I think for the issue actually at topic today, which is not the entire history of your issues with America, I think if you're looking at what the Houthis are doing, I think this is a really clear example of one side is operating on the side of geostability and another wants to burn everything to the ground. And I think that's really straightforward.
Yeah.
Well, I totally agree, except I would say that it seems to, I wouldn't say America wants to burn
I
everything
promise,
down.
Hey, Joe,
show,
buddy,
yeah.
I promise we'll get into it, but I got to give everyone here an introduction before
That's
we
fair.
kind of get into it. But no, it's good that you have this
Carry on.
energy. It's good that you have these things. Omar still can't
Omar's
hear
just
you.
going off. Omar, he's just holding forth, and we can't hear him at all.
He's solving
giving
the
a speech.
issue. He's solving
Oh,
the
Omar.
issue. So he's poor Omar. In the meantime,
Oh, no.
Noah, welcome back.
Hi.
What are your
Good to
thoughts
see you.
here? Go ahead.
Houthis? Well, I'm not sure what we're debating here. Houthis are kind of interesting. You know, at the beginning of the Yemen civil war, I was kind of cheering for the Houthis.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Omar.
Me?
Oh no! Like once in a while, he just like his voice comes in.
Yeah,
and
just pops in.
Is this normal for Twitch streaming?
No.
We just have Omar restart his whole thing.
Yeah. Tell you what. Hey.
I think I think Omar's a psyop because he's meant
Hold
to be
on.
on my side. And it just so
A moment,
happens
please.
that
A
he's
moment, please. A moment, please.
The
Hey, can
CIA
one of my
sent
moderators, can one of my
Yeah.
moderators jump backstage real quick to help Omar with his stuff, his tech stuff? I'm gonna move you backstage. Hopefully one of my moderators can get get you on your way, fix your stuff, and then we'll pull you back on when you're ready. Is that cool, Omar? Okay, we'll do that.
Thanks for your support, Omar.
Okay. Unfortunately, yeah, this is how it's gonna have to be. Okay.
That's all
Omar,
right.
he looked like a 1980s drug lord. I really appreciate that.
He's
With the sunglasses, just leaning back there. He's like, yeah,
1980s drug lord, so he is CIA.
Oh,
boy.
perhaps. We never know. We never know.
Hey,
Look,
that's a joke.
in defense of the CIA, they pulled the most hilarious op ever, which was to open a brothel in San Francisco, grab random Johns who tried to come to the brothel, dose them with LSD, and observe them in an uncontrolled setting.
Really?
If you don't like that, what would you want an intelligence agency to do?
That's
if
kind
not
of based, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
If it wasn't, if it wasn't for all the murder, like the CIA, they are pretty wacky. Like they're quite, there's an entertainment factor. It's just unfortunate about all the killing. I mean,
they
when
tried
I
to
said
kill
before,
Castro
like,
with a poisoned fudgesicle and an exploding
uh,
seashell.
they tried to make his beard fall out because that would make him lose support of the Cuban people. Like what?
The CIA were absolutely getting high on their own supply. There's no question
Yeah.
about this.
This is what your tax money goes to, like.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen Fringe? Have you seen that show? That's like not even exaggerated. That's just.
I haven't. No, I mean it would be quite hard though to sort of satirize the CIA because they're just so. I mean, because they honestly they act like cartoon villains. They really do.
Can I just give you a reality check? I actually have a lot of friends that work in intelligence. They are extremely smart people, most of them with multiple degrees in their field, and they do risk their lives to try to bring information that can help the United States come to decision advantage when it comes to national security. When you're looking at our really stupid idea to invade Iraq, you were looking at the CIA, a fundamental intelligence failure. So I think if you want the United States to make better decisions, I think you should be wanting the CIA to have the resources it needs. And I think it's really important to appreciate the seriousness of the people that work in intelligence. I've never in my entire career met someone that worked in intelligence and I can go, holy shit, they've really got their shit together. Just really being honest.
Oh, look,
Well,
I
okay,
mean,
but let's
sorry,
distinguish between the different branches of the service. The NSA is extremely competent,
Yeah.
and military intelligence is extremely competent.
Yeah.
The CIA has gone through a number of reforms and restructurings. It was anyway. We know the history of the CIA.
Yeah.
There's a reason why
there's
we
a lot
kind
of
make
crazy
fun of the
stuff.
CIA.
Yeah, the men who stare at goats. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff there, but I feel like sometimes we get into these broad stereotypes, and it's not true in my experience.
Well, if I offended any of your friends at the CIA, I've got to say good. But
Sure.
quite frankly, I mean, the CIA, you keep speaking about sort of history of US foreign policy as if it's just a series of whoopsies, we did a genocide. I mean, what are they? What exactly is the US doing that is stabilizing as opposed to completely destabilizing?
I think we came here to talk about the Houthis, and I think that's what I want to talk about.
I mean, to be fair though,
it's going to be an interesting discussion. Okay.
To be fair though, what America is doing with the Houthis does play into is America a stabilizing force in the world or not? On Wednesday, I believe it was Wednesday, it might have been Thursday, America and 12 other nations sent basically an ultimatum to the Houthis, whether they needed to cut their shit out, stop these attacks on global shipping, or there would be some sort of retaliation. And again, it's reported that America and its allies are looking into making direct strikes on targets within Yemen. Is that, if not a stabilizing force, what would you call that, Mr. Tankie?
Well, I mean that I think you've sort of got to like you all come from the position of US hegemony where the US is sort of like by default the good guy, or I mean, not even so much the good guy, but just that there seems to be this understanding that people outside of the imperial core or states outside, or even militant organizations are somehow less, like by standard, like they're less moral or less. That there's just this sort of understanding that that the US has sort of a world police privilege. Like, I mean, who are the US to tell the Houthis that they can't do this, or any country really? Because at the end of the day, the Houthis they don't have the resources, obviously, of the US or the Western regimes in general. So they are doing what they think is within their, well, they're doing what is within their power to negatively impact Israel, because really no other nation state is. I mean, the West is all on board. They can pretend, they'll say things about caring about civilians, but at the end of the day, they're still funding Israel. They're still supplying weapons. So the Houthis, within their limited resources, are trying to impact the economy, which in the case of apartheid South Africa was actually the most impactful sort of action against it. So, I mean, to frame it as if like the Houthis are just out there acting like sort of unhinged pirates, when what they're doing has a clear and righteous and moral goal. So I think that the US is destabilizing by trying to interfere with that. Why don't they go and try and interfere with the fucking genocide? Excuse my language. Sorry.
Okay, I have to jump in here and say there are major
Go ahead.
variables and there are minor variables. You hate America. I get it. You're not American. You want to burn us to the ground. 100%.
I don't hate Americans.
Oh,
Let
hold
me
on,
make
hold
that
on. Hey,
clear.
Hold on.
just
Sorry.
real quick. We gotta go one at a time.
Sorry.
One at a time.
All right.
Let
I
me
just wanted to say that I do not
I hear you. Let me
at
talk.
all.
Okay, so I understand you're not American. Your primary goal here is to not talk about American interests. I am. I care about our country. I want us to have better foreign policy. So I want to think about the major and the minor variables here. So the fact is, what is happening in Yemen is it's basically this series of proxy wars that is destabilizing not America, but the entire Middle East. By some estimates, in the middle of this proxy war, 400,000 people have died to date because of this. And it's because of Iran's axis of resistance here. So you have basically Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're in a proxy war. Saudi Arabia kind of is this. It's the very definition of a place that wants stability. Iran is the exact opposite. They want a theocracy, and they're conducting this proxy war between them. And Iran is very directly sending weapons to the Houthis to destabilize and launch an attack on Saudi Arabia. Now, there's a discussion to be had about America's role in this, because we do give a lot of weapons to the Saudis. That is a fact. We've tried to put limits on that by putting in writing some of the hard targets that we are saying they can't attack because it violates international law, because we do care about that. And Saudi Arabia is the one that has chosen to not do that. So I think if you're looking at the people that are most responsible for what's going on in Yemen, in my view, I think it is this Iran-Saudi Arabian civil war that's happening. I think the United States is a player in that, but I don't think there's evidence that we are the major variable here, unless you want to go way back in time and look at our decision to invade Iraq and how taking out Saddam Hussein kind of took out this buffer state and like exacerbated the entire situation.
Well, I mean, that is somewhat relevant, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
I also wanted to get Noah in here and get some of his thoughts
Yeah.
on all this. Please, by all means.
Well, I mean, the Houthis, started off. I was kind of sympathetic to them, and they've really become very sucky people. They've brought back slavery, which I think is a bad thing. I don't like that. They've done various other stuff. They do the Nazi salute. They've explicitly, copied Nazi stylings. In the Civil War, they've been no more brutal than the guys they're fighting, the two factions that they're fighting. which are, the Houthis are backed by Iran, and the other two factions are backed by basically Saudi Arabia and UAE. And so all of the guys have been kind of brutal. Wick, if you're wondering who those two factions are, they're the sort of internationally recognized quote-unquote government of Yemen, which controls much of the eastern part of the country, and then the Southern Transitional Council, which is this other group controls part of the south of the country. And those guys aren't like great guys either. There's no one who wants to control Yemen who's especially a great guy. And they had this big civil war, and a lot of people died. I would not pin the blame for that on America. America did, for a while, try to help the Saudis, put down the Houthis. That failed. But the Houthis are no better than the other guys, and they've enslaved a bunch of people. They've done all these Ethiopian women that they've gotten to sex traffic and bring in to be slaves. They suck. They started off kind of okay. They were doing these like summer camps for kids, and they were standing up for the oppressed Zaidi minority in Yemen. At that point, I sympathized with them, but they became really sucky people. And their famous slogan is, of course, death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews, which some Arabic-speaking friends have told me better translates as fuck the Jews. And of course, glory to God. But they suck. There's nothing about these guys that makes them sort of the people I want to be my human rights advocates. Like if suppose it was in the 1980s and you were mad about apartheid. Like, okay, you're mad about apartheid. Yeah, apartheid fucking sucks. And then, but you yourself have slaves. I would be like, okay, maybe there's a little bit of hypocrisy there. Okay, but then to bring attention to the apartheid issue and to, you were just going to blow up any ship of any country that like traded with South Africa to bring attention to the apartheid issue when you yourself have slaves. I'm like, no. At this point, you're just acting out. At this point, you're just being a chaos agent. And like, I know apartheid's bad, but just blowing up random ships isn't going to help. So how about you cut that out?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Seems reasonable.
there's
Well said.
one thing that I guess really frustrates me is that you guys aren't really giving any agency whatsoever to the people of Yemen. I mean, so let me just read this. This is from my friend who is in Yemen. I understand that one person isn't representative of the whole population, but he's said here that since the Houthis have taken control of a large portion of the country, for the first time, Yemen has started distributing zakat, which is essentially a tax on the rich. He's said here that it's been put towards poor people who struggled under the previous US-friendly regime. It's allowing things like people to have just like things like marriage ceremonies. He's also said here that basically the Houthis are allowing a sort of collective, basically parties that he's said here, he's specifically listed Sunni, Shia, and women as some examples. So these people who didn't have voices prior are now being, they've been given voices, and they're also being
women
also they're getting more
voices
government
by
services.
a regime.
Well, yes,
slavery?
I think the thing is,
that has women as sex slaves.
well, this is the thing is like, if I cite a source, like Middle Eastern Eye or something, you'll say, oh well, that's bullshit. But then where are you pulling these sources from? And then where are their sources coming from? Like,
Arabia?
you guys,
Yeah.
I don't
You
just
can go on his Twitter and look at this. Actually, it's
look
right
at it.
there. Yeah, I was looking at it
I
the
don't
other
just
day.
accept hegemonic propaganda on the face of it. Like, you
can just look at any inconvenient fact, like, oh, your favorite guys have slavery. Well, who reported that? The fucking New York Times, agent of hegemony. AP, agent of hegemony. Reuters, agent of hegemony. Al Arabiya, Al Jazeera, agents of hegemony. Agents of hegemony everywhere. The only truth is this, tanky blog that I follow. You can do that if you want. You can just willfully disbelieve anything that comes from something that, like, your wacky buddies.
Okay, no. Listen, what happened to the babies who were beheaded?
Which is true.
Hey, why don't you shut the fuck up and let someone else talk for a
hold on,
second.
hold on, one second. Whoa, okay. I like the energy. But let's bring it down just a notch. Okay.
Wick, it's
It's
getting
this-
good. Don't do it. No.
It's just this smug liberalism that just accepts the worldview that they've been fed to since you were, since you popped out your boring parents' womb, basically. And that is one of just acceptance of hegemony. You don't question the narrative. You don't look into
the
the more.
subject today is the Houthis. It's not your
Well,
issue with
because-
America. Just
Oh,
to
I
be
like
clear.
it. No, let's not.
Oh.
Let we can take it to issues with America. I'm happy with that.
Oh,
No. But what I'm
saying,
saying, right, is that you will believe absolutely everything that is reported about the Houthis that comes out of a hegemonic sort of Western media. But if I cite a different media source, you won't even look into that. Now, I do read the New York Times. I do look at their narrative. Well, I don't read it page, front to back, but I do have a look to see what's going on and what their narrative is.
100% grant you. My perspective is absolutely tainted, not tainted, is influenced by the fact that I am in the West. I'm English. I read stuff in those, in that language. That is a bias. And look, I'm an American. I may be a progressive, but I'm still 100% team my country, right? So I completely agree. I completely agree.
As you say right there.
Let her finish.
Agree that is my perspective. Where I think we're coming to some difference here is if you have a perspective that is rooted in fact with something that you can point to and it seems credible, I'm entirely open to the fact that I may have missed something. Just being honest with the Iran, the Israel-Palestine conflict, I've been reading a ton about the Middle East. And it's like every single time you learn something, you peel back another layer and you're like, oh, this thing I believed was true, there's actually a lot more complicated than I believe. Like, I'm incredibly open for that. But you got to come to me with an argument that's not just vibes, man. Because America sucks is not an argument.
Okay, well, what's your understanding of how the Houthis came to power within the context of the Arab Spring?
Sure. So this is my understanding. You have the Houthis in 1990. Basically, they created with the Arab Spring. It threatens Saudi Arabia. They try to basically come in and crush them. And from there, the weapons. Iran gets involved because it's part of the proxy war, and it has gotten worse and worse. Right now, they control 70% of the country. As Noah was talking about, you have some really, really bad shit like selling women into sex slavery. It's been criticized like nearly universally for their human rights abuses. And now the reason that we have this alliance of, correct me if I'm wrong, 12 countries that are considering strikes on the Houthis is because they are attacking international shipping lanes because they want to harm Israel. And as if, what I find amazing is as we talk about that, as if that's a valid thing to do. Like to just try to hurt Israel and destroy every ship that goes into Israel. Like we're not even talking about that, how just insane that is. So I think they're a destabilizing force. And I think if you're talking about destroying the world's shipping infrastructure and force them to reroute their ships around Egypt, I do think that's the time that an international coalition gets involved and fucking destroys you. I think that's entirely appropriate.
Okay, so why do you not, I suppose apply that same scrutiny to the actions of the US who are...
Why don't we stick on the topic, which was the Houthis,
before
we go into some irrelevant shit.
Hold on, just...
I think it's...
It is.
Real quick, let's give Joe here, Tankie here, let's let him go and finish his point. Right. So go ahead.
See, I think this is the fundamental I guess problem where it's basically impossible for us to come to any sort of agreement. I mean, I think morally we probably are aligned. It's just, as far as in a very idealistic sort of way. I'm not talking about, specific material morals, but as far as just, just vibes, probably much the same. However, you sort of seem to come from this viewpoint that the US is like I said before, like by default, it is, you know, it is the stabilizing force, as you say, or that it is sort of has a moral superiority. I mean, you talk about the axis of resistance as though they are just like just a big group of evil terrorists. Yet the people in those countries overwhelmingly support the axis of resistance. So, I mean, is your implication there that everyone in these countries are terrorists?
I want to give Noah a chance to speak, but he asked me a question, so I'm going to answer it directly. One of my really big biases is I think humans have been slaughtering each other for resources since we were going across the Serengeti trying to hunt down a saber-toothed tiger to survive through the winter, right? And I think one of the things that stops us from slaughtering each other is stability. I think the flow of trade, I think treaties, I think medicine, I think like this international order has a lot of problems, but I think generally speaking, it adds to geostability. And I think with the axis of resistance specifically, it's this extension of Iran, whose goal, generally speaking, is destabilizing the world order and ushering in a theocracy. Now, they're entitled to that opinion. They're independent sovereign countries, but I don't support it. I think it's a bad direction. I think it's going to lead to a lot of misery. And I think for Yemen, it has directly led to this civil war that, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe 100,000 people have died, and the UN calls this the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world today, as of a few months ago. So, yeah, I think it's really bad.
Well, do you think that it's just a coincidence that the areas that have been held on to by the Western-friendly side of that civil war is where the oil is? I mean, like, do you not see that basically when it comes to U.S. interests, I wouldn't even say the U.S. is immoral in the way that it sort of takes its, you know, with its foreign policy. I'd say that it's morally agnostic in that what its concerns are with its, you know, with its capital, it's with its growing more wealth for the 0.001% of the United States, the bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call them. And it's quite easy to sort of demonstrate that every action that the US takes in its foreign policy.
I don't think every action. I'm not stupid.
Well, okay. What name? Please tell me a time post World War II where the US has. It doesn't even have, not necessarily direct invasion, but has meddled in foreign affairs for the reasons of, you know, just morality or even just stability. Like because I can't think of one.
I think this mission to destroy the Houthis is a great example. But look, the last time
But that's
I did a
protecting
show,
capital.
the next
That's protecting
time,
capital.
it's not about protecting capital. It's about
It is.
like
It's for the trade of
the relief
of
that
trade.
people are so upset that we need to get to Palestinians, which I agree with. That's coming through these shipping lanes, right? So it's about world stability. But the last time Noah and I did a show together, something we very strongly agree on is we want United States foreign policy to pivot away from the Middle East and move towards Asia. You know, I am not convinced at all that our involvement in this part of the world has been good, right? And I think one of the reasons I believe in energy independence is because I think the less we can get involved with this Middle Eastern cold civil war that seems to be going on, I think we're just going to get blamed for every bit of it. So I kind of want to move towards leaving them to their own fate. Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
so,
yeah,
so-
absolutely.
Go ahead, Noah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm concerned. You know, when you talk about global trade, you talk about protecting capital, blah blah blah. Capital would be, you know, all the companies involved in global trade.
Corporate,
But global
Western
trade is
corporate.
sure. And yeah, you know, maybe that's what people care about. I care about the you know, poor people.
Yeah.
I think about, you know, a lot of global trade is stuff like food, you know, and fuel that's really important to poor people. And if you live in a developing country like Indonesia, you should know that when you start messing with food and fuel imports, things get bad really fast. And I mean, look at Sri Lanka had an economic crisis, a currency crisis that caused food and fuel imports to be interrupted, and it caused mass impoverishment, just really chaos, and it's really bad. Or Egypt, whenever bread prices spike, just like people are in danger of like starving. It's terrible. So if you talk about global trade is necessary to sustain the lives and livelihoods of people, of poor people, everywhere in the world, in the so-called global South, but in Africa, in India, in Southeast Asia, all these places, they need trade. And even if you could convince yourself that the Houthis were acting completely altruistically and staging a protest against Israel's actions in Gaza by attacking shipping and disrupting global trade, even if you could convince yourself that that's what they're doing, rather than like trying to act as agents of Iranian imperialism or whatever, even if you convince yourself of that, it's going to hurt poor people around the world to disrupt global trade like this. It's going to hurt them. And I don't want to see the poor people hurt by the interdiction of food and fuel.
So yeah, I mean, look, that's I would say it's a little bit misguided, but it certainly comes from a good place, which I can appreciate. So do you think that the Houthis are just, I mean, are they just unhinged Muslim men who just want to cause chaos for no particular reason? Like what's their goal?
Well,
then?
let me address that a bit. So
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
I think that the stereotypes of unhinged, crazy Muslims who just want to destroy and kill is bullshit. And to be fair, it's bullshit that's sometimes promoted for cynical reasons by some militia organizations in the Middle East, like, we love death. No, you don't. You run away as soon as the death starts coming at you. No, but like, but it's not true. People in the Middle East are not just like death-loving, crazy Muslims. That's wrong, okay? That's not how it is. But what is true is that the Middle East is a very violent place. Yemen is an extremely violent place, and people who live in extremely violent places their whole lives get into a mindset that violence is the answer to every problem. And you get this, you see this in anarchic zones. You see this in America, in places where police have been very brutal to black communities. You see people just eventually they stop calling the police and they start settling their disputes themselves, which inevitably involves violence. And a cycle of violence takes hold in anarchic places, and the Middle East is very much an anarchic place. And the United States has contributed to anarchy by invading Iraq, by supporting various people. So yeah, the United States contributed to that anarchy, but it is anarchic, and it is that mindset of only violence can fix these problems is endemic to the Middle East, to every part of the Middle East. You see it in Israel, obviously, what they're doing in Gaza. You see this with Saudi Arabia, how they treated the Houthis, but you see it with the Houthis too. That they think this way. They think only violence and power and blood can create a better world, and it's just wrong. I'm not dissing these people and saying
You're
fucking
contradicting
idiot.
yourself there, though, aren't you?
Am I?
Because you said that you don't think that Muslims are inherently violent, but now you
Not at all.
talk about it,
Not at all.
but then you say
Nothing
that
about
it's a violent place. What caused it to be a violent place then?
Prisoner's dilemma. What caused it to be violence begets violence, right? When you have fights over resources, oil, obviously. I mean, oil. Ultimately, it's oil that caused all this. The fights over this main resource in the ground.
And who would you say is causing the destabilization in the West Asia region?
Mostly local people. Honestly, mostly it's local people fighting over oil, because when there is a resource like that, people fight over it. Obviously America intervened, Russia intervened a lot. Iran is a local power. They did a lot, but a lot of militias on the ground, and local little governments on the ground, nasty local governments. These people have agency too. They're not just puppets with their strings being pulled by foreign powers.
Of course.
Foreign powers have influence. They are important, but local people have agency too. And when you have a resource like oil, it just begat all this violence. So also the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, if you want to go into history and blah, blah, blah. And Sunni Shia religious conflicts were probably important in there. So there's a lot of factors going on, but I think ultimately oil is the biggest one. When you have a resource like that, people fight over it, and then they get into a mindset of fighting, and it's bad. I'm not blaming anyone for this. I'm not saying, Middle Eastern people are inherently crazy, like Europe back in its if you go back just 100 years, 200 years in Europe, Europe was just as crazy. I mean, the Middle East hasn't done anything remotely as crazy as World War One. Like World War One exceeds in craziness the sum total of everything the Middle East has done in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Like
And
Europe's
yeah.
crazy too. Everyone's crazy when their incentives are wrong, okay? And in the Middle East, the incentives have been wrong for so long that it has entrenched a mindset of violence as the response to every problem.
I mean,
Well,
sorry, I
no,
was
it's fine.
just quickly. I mean, Iraq is a perfect sort of example of where. Now, look, I'm not. Don't worry, I'm not Saddam Hussein's #1 fan by any means. But at the end of the day, he had that country stable. He nationalized the oil, which is, why America took issue with it. So it's just, it's this ongoing sort of trend that whenever a sovereign state tries to essentially nationalize and make the most, and reap the benefits of this. And I do agree with you that the oil is just, it sends people nuts, like, right? And it doesn't matter, whatever, Middle East, West Asian, like that. It does cause. It is the #1 sort of cause, out. I suppose. How would I word it? Like it's an outside factor that isn't. It doesn't have agency, right? So I would say that it is a big factor. But I guess my point there is that stability. There has been stability at times, and until the US sort of decides to come in and take issue with countries nationalizing their own resources. And this goes back to what I was saying before, that all these actions, at the end of the day, they're not inherently evil. They're just looking out for, as they say, American interests, and their interests are capital.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Saudi Arabia nationalized its oil. Saudi Aramco is one of the most valuable companies in the world. It is a national oil company. Saudi Arabia has nationalized its resources, and the United States is their ally. Most countries, if you look at oil resources, have nationalized them, and the United States pretty much does not have a problem with this. The reason is because the United States sells the technology to extract the oil through companies like, that's what Halliburton does, that's what 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 does. Increasingly, that's what like Exxon does. The countries nationalize their oil resources in the ground, but to get it out, they need the technological expertise of the Western companies, and the Western companies come in and do that. And that's what's really hurt Iran. We put sanctions on Iran over their nuclear program, which I thought was a mistake, but we did, and that's what's really hurt them. Iran. Anyway, that's going a bit far afield, but the point is that the United States. Yeah. Almost everybody has nationalized oil resources, right? Venezuela had nationalized oil resources long before Hugo Chavez. Like PDVSA is a state-owned oil company and was responsible for all of Venezuelan oil extraction going back decades and decades. Every oil-producing country you look at has nationalized resources, or basically not all. There's a couple who don't, but I don't think that's it. I think that what you're talking about was a thing in the 1960s. And a lot of people still think it's the 1960s, but we underwent this change.
Yeah, and sure, and so now now it takes the form more of what you'd say is a neo-colonial or imperialist, in which there's not direct control, but sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I was just just to briefly explain, because I know that a lot of people hear these terms like neo-colonialism, imperialism, and then they may not know the difference. And I'm not being condescending whatsoever, but I mean, neo-colonialism, just in case you're unaware, it's basically where, as opposed to having an actual colonial presence, corporate interests who are basically, in lockstep, hand in glove, as they say, with the US. They are the ones who extract the wealth, as opposed to the state doing it, or as opposed to an imperial force directly doing it.
I wanted to jump in here. We can continue down this path, but I think it is, to a certain degree, it seems intellectually dishonest to me to kind of change the conversation to your personal grief with America when I came here. Hold on, please stop talking over me. when the topic today was kind of looking at this region, the history of it, why the Houthis are doing what they're doing, how it ties to like this proxy war with Iran. We can do that, but I want to just state before I say this, I think it's intellectually dishonest, but I'm going to go with it. Coming back, if we are going to talk about like this hatred of America here, this is something I've really been thinking a lot about lately. How America is really a super convenient scapegoat for a lot of really failed leaders. There was a really good piece in Wall Street Journal 2 days ago that I really appreciated, talking about like what the government in Palestine should look like once this Hamas-Israel war is over, and talking about how if you're really wanting peace, it cannot be yet another dictator. There is this trend throughout all these Middle Eastern countries to kind of have a strongman that's in charge of it. And it seems like you have this problem over and over and over again, where you've got these different factions in the country, they don't have a voice, and these really, really aggressive techniques are used to kind of silence dissent. I know you want to say like Saddam Hussein was 100% about oil. I think it's really forgotten just how much terrorism he sponsored and how brutal he was on people, on his own people and people throughout the region. This seems to be a very common issue that is rising up in these countries. So I think what is happening here, I think America does have some role to play. And like I said, I want to pivot to Asia because I'm not convinced our involvement in this area of the world is leading to better outcomes for anyone. And I don't think it's increasing our national security. But I think that is a minor variable. And I think the major variable is a lot simpler. It's just these countries are not run very well. They're run by leaders that are really interested in their own power. And I think they very cynically blame the United States for every bit of it. And respectfully, I think you're kind of buying that propaganda to a certain degree. It's not a rational discussion that we're having here today. It's not policy A, the United States did this treaty and this affected this. It's just vibes. And it's so amorphous, I can't like grab onto a specific example and talk to you about it or even learn something.
Okay, well, let me try and give you a specific example. So when you say that, you want something that is, suppose, concrete in how
with the Houthis,
actions.
I would love to hear something concretely justifying them just like attacking
Well, how about
international shipping. Yeah.
Yeah, how about this?
Yeah.
How about I ask a question that may
Sure.
get this
Go ahead.
on a track? Do you think that America and its allies would be justified in militarily striking targets in Yemen based on the Houthis' actions? Do you think it's justified in doing that? Why or why not? That's to you,
asking me or
Tankie.
Brianna?
That's to you. Mhm.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, absolutely not. I mean, like I've said before, like I said earlier, the Houthis are doing what they believe is within their power, and might I add, with the support of the local population, in showing solidarity to the extent they can with the resources they have,
So-
with the people of Palestine. So I mean, to
I get
say
you.
like,
Let me ask you something
Yeah, no.
specific then. So
Yeah.
if there is a freighter in the region comes under attack by the Houthis, okay? Houthi freedom fighter pirates, whatever you want to call them, begin assaulting the vessel. That vessel puts out an SOS, a distress call for help. Then the U.S. Navy or another Navy receives this distress call. Should they just not respond? Should they allow the Houthis to do whatever it is that they're going to do and just sit back and do nothing? Because the Houthis are justified in what they're doing? Or what should happen, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, look, I understand the position you take, and I guess, do you want me to answer that in the sort of way of what
Answer
I
it
would like
honestly.
in the perfect world?
Whatever you think.
Well,
man.
I mean, I understand that when that sort of things happen, that of course the US is going to respond, and of course they're going to help, because I mean that's that's in their geopolitical
Okay,
interests.
but should they?
No, absolutely not. But I mean, like, how far do you want to take it back? If we're talking about morality, then the state of Israel just shouldn't exist. So the US
Oh
shouldn't
my
be.
God.
Oh, well, no, it shouldn't, because I mean,
What's a state that should exist?
well, the
What's an
state of
name a state
Palestine
that
should
should
exist.
exist? Palestine should exist. Yeah,
Rhodesia. Um,
Rhodesia
like,
should
I
exist.
mean, what do you? So let me. I mean, no, that was a joke. The reason I say that Israel shouldn't exist is because it has a. And you want to talk about how, vibes as opposed to vibes. I mean, there is a endless sort of list of literature, of academic literature outlining how the state of Israel has, they've undertook what is, as they say, just run-of-the-mill colonialism, apartheid, and genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I mean, if you want me to go through the specific aspects of what that
I can
entails,
answer a really
so it's
specific
less
question.
vibes.
Can I ask you a super quick question? So
Of
help me
course.
understand this. So the argument that Israel should not exist is because in 1948, basically, you had the Nakba, and basically that was a takeover of that. That was in 1948. By the way, 78 countries. We have 195 countries in the world, including Palestine, which should be a state, but I'm going to go and count it there, even though recognition is difficult. 195 countries, 78 are actually younger than Israel. But to you, I guess we need to abolish all 78 of those. But let's talk about Yemen very specifically. Someone help me out here. What year was it that the Houthis took over 70% of the Yemen
2004?
government? Was that 2014, I believe? So that is much younger. So why did the Houthis get to take over this government? And it's just like they've got the sovereign right to do that.
Well,
Stay out
I
of their
mean,
business. And then Israel in 1948, but they can't do it. Is it because they're Jews? Like, what's
oh
the
God,
moral
no.
difference
I
there?
mean,
Yeah.
let me be very,
No,
very
just answer my
upfront.
question without blaming
No,
America.
no,
Help me
no.
Let him
I
understand
won't.
the
answer. Let him
difference.
answer.
I won't blame
Yeah.
America, but I just want to make it clear that I completely condemn any sort of anti-Semitism. That is not a position that I hold whatsoever.
Sure, that's
As
great.
far,
But what's the
yeah,
answer?
sure. Okay, so why do the Houthis have more? Why are they more justified in their actions than Israel? Is that the
Why did
question?
they get to make a sovereign state and Israel doesn't? Through violence.
Well,
Like, why is one count and the other
well,
doesn't? I don't understand that.
if you want to go back to the formation of the state of Israel, which it was signed by
Just tell
even
me
the
the
Eastern Bloc.
difference. Just tell me the difference in these two.
It's it's okay, sure. The difference is the Houthis are not committing genocide, apartheid, colonialism, and they don't have a legal settlement.
100,000 people have died in the Civil War, dude. The United Nations calls it the biggest humanitarian catastrophe happening
the
before
civil.
Palestine. So I don't agree with that statement. I don't think there's evidence for that.
What, you don't think there's evidence that the Houthis aren't doing colonialism? Okay,
That they're
I
not
suppose there's
doing a
not.
mass genocide. I
Well,
don't think there's
hold on.
evidence.
They are
Who's claiming that's genocide? There is not one. There is no
regardless,
one. Oh my
we
God,
can
that's ridiculous. Carry on.
recognize at least that there are terrible things that the Houthis are doing to their population, though, right? You do agree that there are
Well,
some things that are. If you were the king of the Houthis, you would stop. I'm assuming you'd stop the slavery, you'd stop all that.
the
Correct?
king warlord of the Houthinis.
Sure.
Yeah, well, look, I would say this, right? I would say that the people of Yemen overwhelmingly supported the movement
The
to.
people in a lot of countries have overwhelmingly supported a lot of terrible shit. Mob rule is not something that we want, right?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I believe in democracy.
That's not
So,
okay. That's not necessarily true because Yemen, in Yemen, in the Arab Spring, a mass protest sort of deposed Saleh, the old
yes,
president, uh, who may or may not have been a tin pot dictator, but they deposed him.
yeah, I agree.
Mass protests deposed him, but the Houthis are on his side. So the Houthis are on the side of Saleh
They
against the
were.
guy who
They
got
were.
installed. They were, yeah. So like, the idea that like Houthis, have mass popular support,
Well, they were on
And
his side until he started taking
saying dumb
actions that
shit.
weren't. Well, yeah,
On it.
basically,
He
not just
couldn't take
saying dumb shit,
actions
but
after he
doing
was
stuff.
deposed. You know, they were trying to restore him for a while, and then they gave that up
Well,
and
there
said,
was
"Okay,
Saleh,
now
and then there was
we're gonna
Hadi,
do
and
it."
so
Yeah,
yeah. So basically,
Freedom Select.
the new guy came in, and then he ended up being just a shit. So they got rid of him. I mean, that's democracy. Like, what's wrong with that, right?
Well, I mean, it's sort of.
And at the
It's
end of the
Civil
day, like
War?
if you,
it
well, the
it's
other, but what about the other? Like,
pro-
there wouldn't be a
protest.
civil war without the other side, which is Saudi backed, which is US backed. And sorry to make it anti-US again, but it's just the facts at the end of the day. So without that side, who are not supported by the population, there wouldn't be a civil war. So there's
So,
my
I
answer.
think that
I have
No,
to
look,
push back
look.
on this just 1 second now. I'll be
Yeah,
super quick
one
on
at a
this.
time.
Super
Woo,
quick.
then
I
Noah. But
find this to
just real
be
quick.
yes,
His partner is gone, so I am going to give him more time than I otherwise would. Just
fair enough.
FYI. But go ahead, Woo.
100%. No, this is what I find this to be so dishonest, like respectfully, because you keep going. It's like United States is backing this. United States is backing that. You're like one step ahead. This is Saudi Arabia and Iran are having a proxy war that's destabilizing the entire United States. It's not America and Iran having a proxy war. It is Saudi Arabia and Iran. And yes, we sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, and many of them have ended up in this conflict, and that is a fact. And I think we should take a tougher look at that. But you're doing this really respectfully, dishonest sleight of hand, where you keep subbing Saudi Arabia for the United States, and I don't think that's true. We have good relationships in some ways, but we've also had very contentious relationships. 9/11 comes to mind immediately.
With Saudi Arabia.
Right. So there's just I think you're doing this like swap here, and I don't think it's fair. Yeah.
The United States are quite explicit about their feelings on Iran. I mean,
Iran sucks.
There was, well, yeah, and that's that's fine. That's your opinion, but I mean, I think it's a bit dishonest to suggest that the US isn't involved in the sort of, I suppose, movement against Iran. That they aren't a huge player. I mean, you look at their nuclear program. I mean, and this isn't like, it's not a crazy conspiracy. It's very much on the record that was sabotaged by the CIA. Like, and I sound like a broken record, but it's it's not my fault the CIA keep doing these rogue operations.
I thought it was Mossad who did that. No?
Sorry?
Well,
Well,
it was Mossad, Israel,
no,
who did that.
no, because they wrote that. What was that virus?
Yeah, no, that was Israel,
Stuxnet,
right?
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, anyway, who knows?
Oh, Wick, this is the coolest story, Stuxnet. You should read about it.
Stuxnet, yeah. Wasn't Stuxnet written by like the?
Well, yes, it was written by an Israeli firm, because that's sort of like that's what they specialize in, which is pretty gross, but whatever.
Software. Yeah, software is gross. For the record,
Yeah, I agree
don't
with
build
that.
SaaS.
Without
Build some hard
software,
tech, you
we wouldn't have to sit through this tonight, gang. So
Well,
blame
no,
software.
well, yeah, I mean, Pegasus has really done wonders for humanity. What can I say? So anyway, kind of lost the train of thought there. What was the question posed exactly?
You were talking about
yeah.
substitute. The discussion was substituting.
Yeah, I mean,
taking away the agency of Saudi Arabia and such, and saying the U.S. is just pulling all the strings.
Well,
that's the accusation.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Trump, he was gloating about his assassination of Soleimani. Like, I mean, so obviously the US is involved in.
No one's saying we're not involved. I'm just asking you to admit that we are a secondary variable. The primary one is Saudi Arabia. Just, can you admit that?
I mean, yeah. I would say that, yeah, in a sense, in a practical sense, like if you look at it and don't consider the context of the greater geopolitical environment, then sure. I mean, on the surface, it is a Saudi operation.
Do you think the United States supports
just
this Cold War?
Just real quick, just let him finish. Let him finish his point, please.
Oh, I mean, well, that's basically it. I mean, you can say that, if you look at it at the end of yes, it's a Saudi coalition versus the Houthis. Like, sure. But it just doesn't take into account the greater environment of geopolitics. Like the US is the dominant empire of the world. I mean, can you admit that?
I think we're moving into a tripolar world, but I agree we're the
Thank God.
most awesome one.
Well,
Well, you know. Yeah.
do
So I mean, with that,
finish your
sorry,
point.
just
Yes, please.
quickly. Yeah. So I mean, with that sort of in mind, I think it's only reasonable to think that in a place as vital as West Asia, with all those resources, particularly oil, but also gas, some others. Yeah, of course the US is going to have. I mean, I mean, look at what did Joe Biden say? If there wasn't an Israel, we would have to create one. That's how important the Middle East is. So, I mean, considering that's what he said, I think it's a little bit naive to think that the United States are not playing a major role in any sort of geopolitical conflict in that region.
Now, hold on. Joe Biden said that because there were, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, there were, what was it, 20 million Jews alive before the Holocaust. Today there are actually fewer Jews alive today than there were before the Holocaust, believe it or not, even though the population of the world has increased by 250%, which is terrifying. Israel has 74% of the world's Jews in it and has a population of about 10 million people. I think he's talking about the fact that Jewish people deserve a home. And I think that's an eminently fair statement. I think that's what he meant by that. I think you're really projecting a lot of stuff here. He's just talking about people deserve a home after the Holocaust.
Can we pull up the video? Because unless he considers the Jews his strategic interests, then no, he was quite explicit in saying that because of the United States' strategic interests, they need that presence in West Asia or the Middle East. As
we do. They are a great partner.
So, well, now you're just contradicting yourself. That's what this is what I'm saying. Like we're talking about whether. Well, no. If we go back to the original question posed, which was, that the US is just kind of a minor player.
Quote, like, just FYI, here's the whole quote.
Yes.
Okay. He says this is again at his visit to Tel Aviv, and he says this. He says the state of Israel was born to be a safe place for the Jewish people of the world. That's why it was born. I have long said, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. That's what he says. So.
Yes, sorry, that's the recent quote. I'm talking about the historical quote. Do you?
If there's another quote, I am unaware of it. If you
all right,
well,
just give me a moment. I'll find it.
Yeah, sure. Just link it to me. But while you look for it, I wanna toss the ball back to Noah because we talked about moving away from American hegemony, right, and to this tripolar hegemony. Do we think that this is making the world a better place or a worse one? What are our thoughts here?
Honestly, I think it's a multipolar hegemony. I mean, there's no hegemony now. It's just the world is reverting to an anarchic state. With the United States is powerful, China is powerful, Russia, the EU, and India also have some power, although a little bit less for each one. And those are all important powers. And then you see regionally, you have countries like Iran having a lot of power. So the world is not an inherently governed place. And during Pax Americana, it was easy to both credit America for everything that went right in the world and to blame it for everything that went wrong in the world. And sometimes it deserved that credit and sometimes it deserved that blame. But the blunt fact of it is that America is weaker than it was, both in a relative, maybe in an absolute sense, but more importantly, in a relative sense. America is a lot weaker than it was. We cannot play world police. The question of whether or not we make a good world police is moot because we can't. It's like we don't have the power to do it anymore. We can't just like wipe the Houthis away like maybe we could in the 90s or something like that. We just can't do that. And the question is what happens now? After Pax Americana, America is still a powerful country among powerful countries. Not necessarily even the most powerful, depending on the region. What do we do now to make sure that poor people around the world can get their food and get their fuel? What do we do to make sure that if you read Peter 𝕍𝖎𝖙, right, this Tank, you've read Peter 𝕍𝖓?
No, I'm not
Guy.
familiar with. No.
Okay,
who's that?
he's a good guy to
Oh.
read. You know, he just talks about this. He spins these very apocalyptic scenarios of the breakdown of global trade and shipping and how this is just going to destroy so many countries around the world. Poor countries more than rich countries, really. Like rich countries will be less impacted than poor countries by the collapse of global trade, which 𝕍𝖓 really thinks is coming. I think 𝕍𝖓's exaggerating. I don't think the collapse of global trade is coming, but I think it's something we've got to worry about. And what do we do now that America physically cannot be the hegemon, you know, of the world, of world police? We can't do it. What do we do to make sure that the poor countries of the world get their food and fuel? How do we do this? And that's the question we need to answer.
Sure. Is that a question like posed to me? And
Well, no,
just
I know
to
that you don't
discuss?
necessarily have an
Yeah,
answer.
yeah.
I don't
Well,
necessarily have an answer to this.
no.
And, you know, I like, yes, random guy, come up with an answer to the solution to geopolitical
Well, no,
security.
I mean, but you know, that's an interest. I guess again, but this is where I suppose we disagree is that I think that stability will increase without the presence of the United States. The only and I mean, at the end of the day, we're never going to agree on that. But I suppose my biggest concern is that
Can you elaborate
a
how, perhaps? Like, this is something you think will happen. Can you?
yes,
I'll
absolutely,
give you the space
certainly.
to maybe
Yes,
explain it a
yeah.
little bit, please.
Okay, so Noah touched on how poor countries getting food, all this sort of stuff. So if you look at I guess at the hegemonic sort of colonial, neo-colonial world order, the reason a lot of these countries have not developed at definitely the main reason that they haven't developed to the level of us, you know, in the first world, as it were, is because of that, what they call unequal exchange and just resource extraction, just raw resources being extracted, not being, not being used for manufacturing or anything like that. Just raw resources extracted at next to nothing, you know, pay off some sort of corrupt US-friendly government, and then the people just continue to starve as opposed to reap the benefits of those resources as they should be. So I think that as you see a breakdown of colonialism or neo-colonialism, and Africa is a great example of where this is sort of there's quite a movement there, and that wealth is able to stay in these formerly colonized states, then those countries are going to be able to develop more resiliency and more self-sufficiency. But
so what is the part of your answer where China or India are better and don't extract that wealth? That's the part I don't understand. We agree on the critique of colonialism. What I don't understand is why China is going to be better.
Well, I mean, I think it's only fair to give them a chance. But the thing about you're sort of speaking as though it's going to go from being the US to China, and you're still going to have a unipolar system. That's not what I want. Going by what China has said, that's not what they want. They support multipolarity
And it's not what's going to happen.
too.
It can't happen.
That's
but
right.
I mean, how? But why? Why? What makes you say that? I don't understand.
Well, I want to give it to Noah.
Yeah, go.
Go ahead, Noah. Why won't that work? Why won't that happen?
Well, first of all, because China's not interested in being world police, but second of all, because China's power will not be as overwhelming as America's power was, during the Pax Americana. And I think that one thing that people don't talk about as much about the Cold War, but that I think was clearly true, is that the United States and the Soviet Union were certainly rivals and even thought about killing each other, and certainly built up nuclear arsenals to possibly kill each other. But on many things, they worked together.
Yep.
On many, many things, they worked together, and they were old allies. The US and Soviet Union had been allies in World War II. They had mechanisms of communication and trust that had been built up during World War II and that did not go away and vanish during the Cold War. And the Soviet Union and America clashed at the edges. And of course, Indonesia was definitely a victim of that. They clashed at their edges, but then within their spheres of influence, they maintained stability inside those spheres. And that's why the Cold War was so stable. It wasn't really just a Pax Americana. It was a Pax America and Sovietana, whatever, I don't know a good phrase. But the point is that in a multipolar world, we don't have that because it's more like what existed during the pre-World War I phase, when the European empires essentially were all sort of jostling to see who could be in control, and eventually
Certainly.
they blew up the world that way.
But that's I guess my question for you, Noah, though,
That's scary.
is well, yes, we won't have one unilateral extractor of resources going around being the world police, etc. Instead, we're going to have who knows how many different little mini tyrants, if you will, right? That maybe don't
Yeah,
just
and
reach.
that's what Peter 𝕍𝖎 talks about. He
Yeah,
talks
yeah.
about the breaking up of the world into these regional blocks with regional powers. That's a scary future because so much of the trade, especially in food and fuel, but in a lot of other stuff too, that sustains the life of, like, literally billions of poor people on this planet, is global trade that is not trade within a region, but is trade throughout different regions, is shipped from Europe to Asia to the Middle East. The global trade's incredibly important, and it's not something that a single regional power can provide simply by being a mini hegemon in its backyard. We need some sort of international cooperation. We need some sort of cooperative agreement between the powers. We need the United States, China, and Europe, at the very least, those three. Hopefully, India. I doubt Russia is going to buy into this, but hopefully the United States, Europe, India, and China could cooperate to make sure that global trade doesn't get disrupted, so that people can get their food, being shipped internationally. And like, the Houthis are just the tip of the iceberg here. They're not the first. Guess who else sits right next to that strait? Somalia. So someone from Somalia could disrupt shipping too. Someone on the other side could disrupt shipping through the Persian Gulf. I mean, Iran has already done that somewhat. And there's other choke points in the world too, like in Indonesia, the Strait of Malacca, and two other big straits that carry much of the world's trade could be disrupted in Southeast Asia. And there's a number of other choke points as well. The point is that our solution to this cannot be America takes over the world, because it can't. Whether or not you think it should, it can't. And the solution can't be that China takes over the world, because it can't, even if it wants to, which it doesn't. And the solution isn't to let the world disintegrate into anarchy, because Houthis are a chaos agent. They grew up in chaos, they live chaos, that's all they know, and they're creating chaos. And we need some sort of global multilateral solution to make sure that doesn't happen, or else a lot of poor people around the world are going to starve.
Yeah. Can I add on to that, Noah? Because I think one of the things I've really wrestled with is, like, what is the progressive approach to foreign policy, right? It's not, kind of war is the answer, like a lot of conservatives tend to do. It's not like what my tanky friends seem to believe, which is, America bad, war always bad.
That's misrepresentation of my view. Well,
There is
please
a wide contingent in America that believes that. I don't know you personally. So the thing I root for as a progressive is geostability. Because, no, I think you're dead on that international trade is caring about poor people. And I think that something we don't talk about enough is when America withdraws from a place, it creates a power vacuum. And in that power vacuum, the world's dictators and authoritarians exploit that and leap right into this. This is why, Putin has spent so much time trying to get America to diminish the power of NATO, right? Or, like, this is my big problem with Donald Trump, is he spent so much time destroying our efforts at international cooperation. There is no future with global warming being a bigger and bigger threat to human survival on this planet that, like, international cooperation doesn't become, like, the primary alternative that we have to just open warfare. Like, if there's a better answer, I don't see it.
I have two questions. I have one for Mr. Tankie here, and I have one for you and Noah. I'll ask Tankie. Joe, I'll ask Joe first. It feels weird calling you.
Call me Joe.
Call him Tankie, right? Like, it just feels weird. Okay.
I gave you a second option.
I know.
My alter ego. That name is actually one of the CIA agents behind the famed Bay of Pigs. I just thought his name was quite funny, so I adopted it.
Fair enough.
Sorry,
Fair
side
enough.
tangent. Go
That's
on.
okay. is there ever a point, or under what circumstances, would you be pro-U.S. intervention into an affair? So would you, if the U.S. right now went and wanted to intervene and stop Israel from what it's doing, just stop it entirely, would that be something where you would be like
Of
pro-military
course,
U.S.
yes.
intervention?
I would be pro-US intervention if it was in the interests of humanity, with a righteous
Okay.
reason and
So give
moral.
a
So
couple
yeah,
examples, please. So the Israel stuff, what
when
else?
the US has been, or theoretically where it could be.
Where it could be, where like
Okay.
there's a lot of fires in the world right now. Which ones do you think, if we had the power to, that you'd be okay with us putting out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the difficult thing is that I mean, as Brianna said, when the US goes in, it tends to not be a stabilizing force. And I'm not being anti-US. That's just how it's been. I mean, the US would basically have to change its sort of entire, I suppose, ideological reasoning behind why it does interfere in the affairs of other regions. So, I mean, if you're talking about God mode, where I'm just, I can control the US and what it does, what its military does. I mean, yeah, look, I would certainly. I mean, the first target would be Washington. No, I'm joking.
Just to be more clear,
No,
just to
no.
be more
Okay.
clear for you,
Yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
I'll cede to all the problems with intervention. I'll just cede to that for the sake of discussion.
Yeah.
Where you feel in the world right now that the costs of U.S. intervention are outweighed by the benefits of the U.S. intervention. Because we can always
Well,
agree there's a cost, right? But when it's
so, okay.
regardless of the cost, that, oh my God, shit's going down right now, we need to step in, even if it's going to be imperfect.
I think that when the US has intervened in the actions of ISIS, that's ultimately beneficial. I mean, you could say that it was it was the US presence that caused them in the first place, but I can say that their I suppose efforts to eliminate that particular scourge was a good thing. Is that what you mean? Is that the sort of question
Sure.
you're posing?
If
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, there's quite honestly, there's just not really many examples, because I think, again, as I touched on before, the US and its sort of capital interests are um, morally agnostics. But unfortunately, when the interests involve extracting wealth for a very small number of people, usually the actions put in practice aren't going to be particularly moral
okay.
or humanistic.
I mean, fair enough. The question
Yeah.
for Noah and Wu's side here, right? Because Brianna, you mentioned, right, that you're pretty anti-war, you're pretty anti-imperialist, et cetera, et cetera. However, do you think that, given all that is at stake, would you? And I understand you want to pivot away from the Middle East, but is there any? I guess, is there any kind of situation where you think that the U.S. should maybe even go in harder on the Middle East? What variables would have to change in the region to be, for either of you, to be like, okay, this is too much, we have to do something? What do we think? What do we got?
I mean, I'm not anti-war when the United States national security or the security of our allies is at stake. A NATO situation where one of our allies in NATO was being threatened, I would feel very comfortable with us stepping in there. It's very situationally dependent. So, show me a situation where there's a clear threat for ourselves or our allies or our strategic interests, and I understand that. I think what has happened all too often is, I hate to keep coming back to the Iraq War, but this was really it's hard to escape this feeling that was the oil companies that we were fighting for then, and not, American security interests as much. So I think all too often it's the interests of the very rich and powerful get substituted for what is best for the American people and our allies. So, give me a conflict where those are genuinely at stake, and I would probably support it.
What about you,
I'm a
Noah?
little
Just
bit confused. Sorry. Yeah.
No,
It's
I
just
want to.
because. All right.
I want
Go ahead.
Noah to
Sorry.
answer
Yeah.
first, and then we can get to the
Yes.
discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Noah, same question to you.
Yeah. What's the question again? Remind me.
Uh,
It was
under what
it veered into
circumstances?
the America bad, sort of discourse,
Sure,
and then I
sure.
forgot what the actual question.
I understand. So you've wrote about pivoting away from the Middle East, right? That you think that we haven't been very good stewards of the area, that our intervention has caused more harm than good. Is there any kind of what circumstances would have to change? What variables in the region would have to change for you to change your mind about that? Or do you think we should just simply write it off entirely? What do you think?
Well, the Middle East.
Yes.
I mean, we don't. Yeah, it's a difficult question because I mean, for example, I think that we should not be like supporting Israel, what it's doing. I think we should remove military aid to Israel,
I agree.
and that's pivoting away from the Middle East, right? I think that in terms of should we allow the Houthis disruption of international trade to draw us back in the Middle East, so we bomb them or something like that? Well, it's what we're going to do. That will happen in the next couple.
Yeah,
weeks.
but is it wise? I understand that that's
probably
happen,
it's probably necessary. I mean, like what I'd like to do is sort of talk to the Houthis and say, okay, Houthis, we'll recognize you in exchange for cutting the shipping stuff out.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I would recognize the Houthis as the legitimate whoever, because they're like, yeah, they have slavery and this evil shit, but like so do the other guys. Honestly, like if you looked at the Southern Transitional Council,
Saudi Arabia.
Okay, but then the point is that I would say, okay, Houthis, we'll recognize you if you just act responsible and stop shooting stuff, and that's what I would try to do. I doubt it would work because they're probably in just like fight mode, infinite fight mode, and they'll be that way for another 20 years before they chill out. Failing that, I would like to get together a multilateral force to protect shipping. I think we need to step up and say, hey, China, you've got shipping that goes through here too, and maybe the Houthis will try not to attack it, but like it's kind of hard to know. Like the only way that Houthis have heretofore avoided attacking Chinese ships directly is because Iranian intelligence has been tipping them off and telling them which are Chinese ships. That's going to fail eventually. Like they're going to shoot down a Chinese ship. And Europe, needs to get involved here. India needs to get involved. India has a pretty big navy too. We need to get those countries. We're certainly not China's geopolitical ally, but China has an interest in maintaining the stability of international trade, as does India, as does Europe. And so we need to get together a multilateral force to protect shipping in that area.
Would you
even as
trust
we try
China?
to talk to the Houthis and say,
would you trust
I would
China
trust
to be
China
an
on this, absolutely.
equal partner in this? Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Definitely.
Fair enough.
I mean, no, China hasn't. They're not used to it. China's not used to power projection. But with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man says. So let's, time to step up. And if you're a tankie, then maybe you'd like to see China step up too, because they've got that communist flag. But so a multilateral force, I think, is the way to protect shipping. We need to try to get that together, and then we need to talk to the Houthis and say, Houthis, we don't really have a fundamental conflict with you. Like, nationalize your resources. That's fine. Who cares? Yemen doesn't have any resources. And Houthis, we don't care about them. We just want them to stop attacking shipping. You can rule over whatever you want and chant your slogan and, whatever.
China says, okay, we'll do it, but you have to give us Taiwan. You can't stop us when we go after Taiwan.
No, that's just encouraging more war and conquest. Let's not do that. We cooperated with the Soviet Union on many things during the Cold War. Right. And we didn't say, okay, hey, Soviet Union, we'll give you, West Germany in exchange for or whatever, in exchange for cooperation on this. We didn't do that kind of shit. We were status quo powers, and the Soviet Union was a status quo power. Now that China's powerful, he should be a status quo power too. And so we should try. And, maybe China says no. Maybe they say no. I think they probably will say no. Then we go to India and European Union and say, guys, we gotta do this. The European Union rejected our first attempt to do this because we wanted their ships to be placed under our command, which was stupid. So go back and say, no, place your ships under your own command. We're not going to command your ships. We're not going to command India's ships. let's have a multilateral force. You know, India. I don't know what tankies think about India now. It's run by Modi, but it was also the creator of the non-aligned movement. Its constitution says it's socialist, but so then. And it's certainly a architect of a multipolar world. It's part of, by any definition you want, it's part of the global South. And so get India involved in this too. I don't know if Indonesia has ships to spare.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's what I think. That's what I think we ought to do.
but
Yeah.
I mean, just sorry. Did you
What's
have?
necessary
Did
to
you want to finish, or
protect
you
the
finished?
flow of food and fuel to poor countries?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
but
Tanky.
but US, you said initially that you would like to see the US withdraw support from Israel, which is wonderful. Do you honestly think that the Houthis will continue attacking ships if Israel, stop their genocide, right, to put it bluntly?
Okay,
Yes.
so I don't think Israel's actions in Gaza are not contingent on U.S. support.
Yep.
Israel's
Well,
going to keep doing its thing.
I agree.
Well, I mean, where will they get the funding? Where will they get the weapons? Do you think that they can?
They're not.
The
do you think
United
they're
States
self-sufficient?
Our
only
aid is like
pays
a
for
small fraction of our.
17% of Israel's military budget. It is ridiculous to think we pay 100% of it. It is 17%.
But would you? I mean, but would you support a complete isolation in the way that
We're changing
apartheid
the
South
subject
Africa?
again. Okay, let's
Hold
do
on,
it.
Hold on,
We're
hold on, hold on,
changing
hold
the
on, hold on,
subject again.
I'm
hold on.
just clarifying.
Let
I'm just
Tanky
clarifying.
make his argument here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. When you say withdraw support, do you just mean as far as military sort of funding and weapons, or do you mean to isolate the country like eventually happened to apartheid South Africa?
Well, no, because I think that the other side in the conflict is quite bad. I think that the people who run Gaza are, if they had as much power as Israel does, they'd be worse than Israel. I
Well,
think
that's
that
not. I mean,
it's
that's.
similar.
I disagree, but that's not going to happen anyway. So it's
Okay.
kind
No,
of a
I
moot
think
point.
what we're facing here is a situation similar to the Syrian civil war, with Israel's government in the role of Assad, basically, and Hamas in the role of ISIS, basically. You've got a, like evil death militia versus government that is just willing to slaughter a whole bunch of civilians to maintain control.
So what do you think? What do you think Hamas, or not even Hamas, because we need to remember that Hamas are just one faction as part of a
They have
coalition.
overwhelming support. No,
Yeah.
they have
Yeah,
overwhelming support.
70,
And what do you
70%.
think?
No. They
Well,
are the government of Gaza. They're the government of Gaza.
What do you think that they're like? What do you think their aims are? What do you think it grew out of? I suppose would be the question I pose.
Hamas?
Yes, or well,
They
just
would like to conquer the current state of Israel, probably
Destroy
killing
it.
many people in the process.
Yeah, destroy Israel.
Like to conquer that land.
I mean,
I feel like
the stated goal.
so.
That's.
I feel like, basically my side in America more generally has really been interrogated tonight. I'd like a chance to return the favor just a bit, Wick.
Of course.
So can you help me understand this? Tanky ideology, right? Marxist-Leninism, really worshiping Stalin to the point you've got him as your bio. Can you just kind of walk me through...
You forgot Pol Pot.
Oh, there we go. Can you kind of just walk me through what, because I was reading your Twitter, you're really casual about advocating for violence. Can you kind of just walk me through what your plan is to get political power and what that actually looks like? Like, just walk me through it. I'm not talking like libertarian, like fanfic, design your own world here. Just kind of walk through what your plan is in your mind to get political power. Mine's really straightforward. My job is to build infrastructure for progressives in the United States, help us win more elections for Democrats, get more people represented that have my views and work through the democratic process. That's a very straightforward mission. What is your mission? What are the steps to bring us to the tanky, glorious future with communism?
I mean, look, absolutely, but it's dependent on one's domestic situation. But I guess to be more general, is first to engage the working class. So build a working class movement, and if we're talking in Western countries, that has to be within the parameters of electoral politics. I don't think that is an end goal whatsoever, but it is something. I mean, a perfect example would be Bernie. While I am very disappointed in where he went thereafter, what you saw there was an opportunity, a missed one in my example, in my opinion, rather, where electoral politics did create essentially a solidarity sort of grassroots working class movement. So from there, it's a case of, I mean, it's a very long process, but basically, it's like I say, it's about building organizations, building solidarity within the working class, so that when you have these, I suppose, reactionary elements that are at each other's throats over things like, you know, race and gender, just dumb shit, basically. When I say dumb shit, I'm on the side of racism is bad and you can be whatever gender you want, right? So that's what I mean by that. So I think, you know, it's a very long process, but basically you need to build solidarity around the shared interests of the working class.
Just
You build solidarity. What happens next?
Oh, fair enough. You beat me to it. Go ahead.
What, you violently overthrow the government? Like, is that what you want me to say? Like,
I'm just curious. There's no part of Marxist-Leninism that makes sense to me, so I was just hoping you can explain it. Sure.
Yes, yeah, I can, absolutely. So just I'll do it. Say it as briefly as I can. So I mean, I guess obviously historically it's a very different time, but if you look at the Russian Revolution, I mean, that's essentially what the end goal would be, which would be, again, getting the working class together, building what they call class consciousness, and then, you know, and it doesn't have to be through violence. Let me be clear with that, but basically putting a system in place where the interests of the working class are the focus of any sort of state apparatus, as opposed to the interests of the bourgeoisie. It's a very short.
Why do we need communism to do that? Why can all of those policies are possible under capitalism and through liberalism specifically, which, again, looking at your Twitter, you have absolute contempt for. I think you alluded, like, Noah, you've said pretty openly you're a liberal. Like, I think today on Twitter, if I'm remembering correctly, you were alluding that liberals like Noah support genocide, which seems like a really strong statement. So how are the policies you're talking about, class consciousness, solidarity, building a movement that doesn't just work for elite interests, how is that better under communism than it would be kind of just under reforming capitalism?
Well, I mean, you just have to look at the existing, what they call actually existing socialisms. So again, I really am trying to avoid shitting on America too much. But I mean, if you look at a place like Cuba, for example, prior to communism, you know, there was homelessness, there was prostitution, there was gambling, and there was all this money being funneled from Batista's regime into the ultra wealthy, who ultimately had ties to the mob in the United States. Now, once he was just sort of deposed, I suppose, they enacted a state that looked after the interests of the working class. Homelessness was eliminated. Poverty was eliminated. You know, you had full employment, and that's in, you know, and that's despite heavy sanctioning from the US that caused. And again, sorry to shit on your lovely country, but you know, so that's within that sort of paradigm that they were able to establish that. So I mean, it's
my question, just to repeat it, which I don't feel like you're answering, is why specifically is communism better for doing the three things you outlined, which is class consciousness, designing a system that doesn't focus on elite interests, and what was the third? Can someone remind me? Basically building up a worker solidarity. Why is communism required for that?
Because liberalism has had you know, 100+ years to achieve it, and it hasn't. So it doesn't.
I think you should read some of Noah's blog, because he talks a lot about the things that say, you know, free trade has done to address poverty in the world. It's really impressive, actually. You should read that.
Well, let me be clear about how I feel about capitalism and liberalism. I think that it was certainly a huge improvement from feudalism. And I think, like all systems before it, it played its role in building up the productive forces and creating a better world than we had before. But like all systems before it, it eventually runs its course, and it's time for us as a international community to evolve beyond something that is just becoming
Right.
monstrous, quite
But
frankly.
my
So
question to
that's
you,
why
which you did not answer again, is Noah
Yes.
can pull out a bunch of facts and figures that shows through liberalism, which you equated with genocide today, has actually been really good at doing things like alleviating poverty throughout the world. What is the evidence that you have that communism is superior to this thing that Noah has data and has written about really well, showing that it does this? What is the evidence you have that yours is required to do this?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that poverty alleviation, because if you look further into that data, you'll see that a majority of that is from China. And if you take China out, you'll see that that doesn't look so impressive. So, and the way that China has achieved that, and you can say, oh, they've got, they're capitalists, they have free markets, whatever. Like, at the end of the day, when you look at the wealth distribution that has been from engaging in trade and capitalism to the extent necessary, but rather than funneling that all up to the sort of the 1% or whatever, that money has been used on completely eliminating extreme poverty, on building public infrastructure, on having strong social services, like socialized housing, socialized medicine. So, to say that it's liberalism and capitalism that brought the world out of poverty, I mean, it's a communist state that achieved that. So I don't agree with that.
I want to give a chance for Noah to if he wants to opine on that for a moment, he may. Then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of close it up, but I want to give my audience a chance to do some call-ins for the last 20-30 minutes here. And yeah, and then we'll let everyone kind of go their merry way. But I wanted to give Noah a chance to respond to the China was actually the driver of getting us out of poverty globally. Go ahead.
It was the biggest driver, but far from the only one. When you look at how it did it, many countries developed with by increasing state intervention in the economy. For example, South Korea. China developed. Interestingly, China was got the most out of economic liberalization of any country. China's experience, basically until the 2010s, China didn't really have an industrial policy at the national level, and China's welfare state is pretty thin gruel as welfare states go. What China primarily did during its period of rapid growth was to liberalize. Deng Xiaoping, like Milton Friedman, visited China and gave them advice. And the main thing that they did was privatization of SOEs, liberalization of various regulations, and low taxes. If you want to talk about taxes, Chinese communist China is an extremely low tax state, and they make a lot of their government revenue to provide what social services they do provide, which is pretty thin. They make it through land sales. Privatization is what gives them a lot of their revenue. I don't think this was the greatest development model. I think China was actually, in many ways, too liberal. I think that despite the communist flag, they went pretty hardcore for capitalism, and it worked up to a point, and it did a lot for them. But inequality really spiraled. Thomas Piketty had an analysis showing that inequality in China surpassed inequality in the United States countries, and so I think China is a poster child for economic liberalism, for Milton Friedman style, whatever, just get the government out of the way ism. And I think that there's big limits to that, and China's encountering those limits. That causes massive inequality, and then some of your social services degrade. So I think that so my position is that China is the poster boy for liberalism, and then was too liberal in many ways. And so it's a nuanced position, if you will.
Sure, but I mean that sort of builds on what essentially I'm saying, is that capitalism has played a role in improving the material conditions of people around the world. I don't deny that. I don't think that capitalism is just this evil that never should have happened. I just believe, as you pointed out, that it has a limit, because at the end of the day, the goal of capitalism is profit. The goal is further consolidation of wealth. and that wealth will just get more consolidated because the people who have that wealth therefore have more power in politics. And and then eventually you end up with things like neoliberalism, which is just this awful sort of band-aid solution. But that's just late-stage capitalism, and you compare that to, say, the New Deal, which was far more beneficial to the working class, the people on the ground. But you couldn't do the New Deal again. That you couldn't. That's not something that you can go back to because of this incessant need for growth that capitalism has. And at the end of the day, you can't have
The New
infinite
Deal was
growth
all about
on a
growth.
finite planet.
Right.
New Deal was all about growth, though.
Yes, no, I'm not. I'm not saying that wasn't about growth, but what I'm saying is that in order to continue to have this growth, and it's year-on-year growth, it's not. It's exponential, and that's just not something that can continue unabated forever. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that capitalism hasn't had its benefits. I'm just saying that its benefits have reached the end, and it's time for something better.
What I find
Okay, but-
really consistently frustrating about this is I want to defend my position, and I'm not blind to the excesses of capitalism. The reason I'm a progressive at its core is I do think that the elite interests have had really terrible effects on, say, healthcare pricing, right? Where the problem we have in the United States is everyone's taking their little bite out of the pie and getting profit, and then as a result we pay more per capita in the entire world than anyone else to get healthcare and get a very middling result. I'm not blind to that. But this is what I find so frustrating about this, that I have to defend the messy, complicated, real-world version of capitalism, and I have to argue against this blissful, theoretical communist future where human nature is somehow solved, and real issues like how are women treated, how are queer people treated, just get skated over as if communists are somehow going to be just through the goodness of humanity just treat everybody well. It just makes no sense. And the reason I can't buy into communism isn't because I'm like capitalism, go, go, go. It's because when you really drill down to specifics, and I'm an engineer, so I love specifics, y'all don't have an answer to the most basic shit of how stuff gets done. And it makes you lack credibility, in my view.
I want to let you respond, then I want to pass it to Noah, then we're going to...
Just very briefly, I mean, how we get shit done. I mean, all you need, look again at the Soviet Union when they switched to communism. That was an agrarian society. They had literal serfs and peasants, and they were able to build their productive forces in a way that's had never been seen prior in history. So the idea that communism can't achieve such things is just it has no basis in reality. And just one last thing briefly is that women were actually, they were empowered under communism. That's true. And yes, they were, because you look under capitalism, and look, let me be clear. I think that if a woman wants, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. If you want to have children, you should. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not saying that. I don't want to come from the perspective of women should stay home and have a child. However, it is the reality of biology that women are the people that birth the child. Now, under capitalism, I mean, especially you look in the US, a woman basically now has to have the child and get back to work basically the next day. And there's no paid maternity leave. There's nothing like that. Under communism, that's not a thing, because there is allowances made for such things. So I think I find it baffling that, considering the conditions that women and everyone really have to endure under capitalism, that you think that that's somehow a positive.
My argument is Elizabeth Warren's plan to deal with that makes sense, because she outlines how we're going to pay for daycare, and how we're going to materially pay for these structures that lead to inequality for women in the United States. And when you talk to communists, it's just vibes and pointing to the Soviet Union, and it makes it lack credibility in my view.
I wanna pass it to Noah, and then we're gonna close out with some closing statements, and then if my audience wants to call in or super chat some questions, I see your super chats. Thank you. I'll get to them in a second. And then we'll just move on from there. But Noah, thoughts on this, and then we'll just close out.
Yeah, I tankies suck, but I
Thank you.
someone
No idea.
who's Indonesian, I will forgive for being a tanky, because of what the United States
feel so honored.
did in Indonesia in the 1960s, and I think that what the United States did in Indonesia in the 1960s, which is essentially condone a mass killing that killed 500,000 people, killed a lot of people, innocent people,
Close to a million,
for their political beliefs, and that was really bad. At the time, it was at the time the United States did this because it thought that that's what it had to do to maintain stability, and it didn't maintain it. It didn't help. I think it didn't work to maintain stability. I think it reduced stability. I could be wrong, but it felt that we've got to do this or else Indonesia will become another China, and and so I think it illustrates a point, which is that the things we do in the name of stability in the short term can have very negative reactions and blowback in the long term. We support mass political killings in the 1960s, and half a century later, now we have people who think the United States is Satan forever, no matter what we ever do. We've seen substantial blowback in the Middle East. I think the United States and all powerful countries, obviously, Russia and the EU and India and China need to think about this as well. Think about not just the momentary consequences of stabilization, but the long-term consequences of how we durably build a more stable world. And I think that when we face problems like the Houthis in Yemen disrupting shipping or anything else that's momentary instability, this applies. And, the Houthis are, if we had just stood back and sort of not supported Saudi Arabia to try to intervene in that civil war, maybe the Houthis would be less aggressive today. If we had tried to broker peace between the Houthis and the opposition factions in Yemen, maybe Yemen would be a more peaceful place today. Maybe the Houthis wouldn't be attacking global shipping today, or maybe they would. I don't know. But I think that we need to get more sort of far-sighted about these kind of things. And I think that our response to the Houthis, in practice, it will, what we're probably going to do, unfortunately, is just launch some missiles at them. But what we should be doing is looking for a way to integrate the Houthis into a long-term security architecture that, that makes this not happen again and again. And that's the only way we're going to have a multipolar world that is really, stable, because our days as world police are done. So that's what I think.
Isn't that what Biden tried to do when he took them off the terrorist list? Yeah. It didn't work out well.
Yeah, he tried. That's right. And so we have to keep trying. I don't think that necessarily the terrorist list
is there a point so Noah, my issue with this though is that there does come a point, right, where no matter what olive branches you extend, no matter how much negotiating you try, there are just sometimes people are going to want to be evil little shits, okay? And they need to be stopped with bombs and force and violence. And that is unfortunate. It's not something to be celebrated. It's not something we should rah about, but it is something that has to happen. So I understand that
what gives
there
America
always...
the right? It's sorry, just
what do you
quickly.
mean?
You think
when we have power if you have power, if you watch and you see someone aggressing against someone else, if you see someone beating the shit out of someone, and you have the power to stop them, I think you have a moral obligation to stop them.
So then would you support a strike on Washington for what? I mean, at the end of the day, you're saying what? Look at
America
Iraq.
with all its flaws is just better.
It's a coalition of 12 countries. It's not America.
No, but you're saying, like, you seem to think that it's perfectly okay for the United States to just ignore sovereignty, show no respect to sovereignty, and just drop bombs. What if people did that? What if states had the power to and responded in turn to the United States? When you guys went over to Iraq and just started slaughtering people, what if Iraq? What if they could go and drop a bomb on Washington? Would that be okay? Or do you have a different standard to the United States than you do for the third world countries? Because that's
Not
what
the
it
United
feels like.
States. It's 12 countries putting together in a coalition
No,
to
I'm
do
just
this.
talking in
No, I
general.
And
understand.
when
Like,
you
what?
start a fight with
Hold on.
someone, when you start a fight,
Let me
yep.
answer the question, because it
Sure.
is a question, right? I think that it's context dependent. If America is at a point where it is killing civilians like left, right, and center, and someone wants to use military force to stop them, by all means. But this is a thing. I think that of the options available, America is the very best one. There have been times where other countries have sought to do political assassinations in America. I think there was a recent event, I think in New York City. Was it India? I know in India did a strike against a sheik in Canada of late, right? Recently. Man, I wish I had this up on my fingertips, but I think this happened recently in New York City. We didn't make a big deal of it, right? Like, we didn't get all up in arms about it because we understood what was happening. There's some bad guys there that need to be taken out. I think that sovereignty, right, takes a backseat to morality in the end of the day. And if any sovereign nation, is doing horrific things to others or its own people, if we have the ability to, we should step in. Now, as Noah says, we are losing our ability to step in a lot of ways. We just don't have it anymore for a wide variety of reasons. And unfortunately, we do have to pick and choose where we get involved. That's just how the world is. But if I was king of the world and I had infinite resources and I had infinite power, yeah, I would be the world police forever. That's what I would do, right? But that's me. I wanted to thank all of you for being here today. I really appreciate you guys coming in and talking to me and talking to each other. It's been fun. I'm sorry that Omar wasn't able to fix his stuff. We had one of my mods backstage for almost half an hour trying to fix it, but I don't know what was wrong. But I want to give each of you a closing statement, shout yourselves out, and then we have a couple callers and some super chats. Cool? Everyone good with that?
Sounds good.
Do we stay for the super chats and callers, or do we leave for that?
The call in, you can stay. They're going to want to talk to you probably.
Oh,
right.
okay.
But yeah, well, let's start with Noah, and let's go to Tankie, and then we'll finish off with Wu. So Noah, give us your closing spiel.
The world is an ungoverned place. There is no global government. There is no higher power governing it. As you know, within a country, we have governments that make laws. In the world, the governance is only provided by the actions of powerful states with their own conflicting interests, and that's unfortunate. Maybe someday we'll make a world government, or maybe someday the aliens will conquer us. I don't know. But I'm about ready for those aliens right now. No, but we have to do the best with what we can, because stability and global trade and things like that are incredibly important global public goods. And they are not, there's no world government to naturally provide those. Those must be provided by the actions of independent states with their own selfish interests and their own internal divisions. The United States is internally divided. We go through, our policy changes depending on who's in control. And this is also true in other countries, like you see China shifting from a more non-intervention stance to a more belligerent stance now, because their internal, who is in charge of China shifted. You saw shifts with America from, George W. Bush to Barack Obama. You see shifts like this all the time, Yeltsin to Putin. And you see, basically, it's a very difficult problem to solve. There's no sort of general, simple solution. We can't just hand wave our hands and say, well, the global working class, will take over, indigenize all resources, and create a Marxist paradise. I mean, that's not going to happen. That's silly. But nothing else that we say we'll fix it is an easy fix. Okay, there's no easy fixes. We just have to keep stumbling and bumbling through, because that's what you do when you have this inherent global anarchy we have. And so we've got to recognize that, and we've got to recognize that pragmatism, not theory-driven idealism, has got to govern our actions. That's my statement.
Well, thank you. Where can people find you if they want to find more about what you have to say?
Oh, I have a blog. It's Noahpinion, Noahpinion. You can go read that blog.
It's on Substack. It's great. I recommend it. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Tankie, go ahead.
Take it away. All right. Well, look, I mean, first, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I guess like I was saying earlier, I think that if you look at things very idealistically, as far as just wanting the best for humanity, I don't think that there's any particular clash there. But I think that there is a great divide in the way that people like myself, tankies, if you like, see the world compared to those who are very much signed on to the hegemonic worldview of the United States. And again, I don't want to go on too much, but if you look historically, post World War II, and I mean, even then, bombing civilians wasn't, dropping nukes wasn't all that nice. But there's just a very clear pattern of where the United States interferes with other sovereign states. It leads to nothing but chaos. And also, the other pattern is that when the United States does go into these, these various operations, it does tend to enrich their, your bourgeoisie, your elite class. So I think that if you are in a good faith position of wanting the best for humanity, that you really need to analytically look at the actions of the United States in its foreign policy, see what the pattern is, and maybe just reconsider your stance. To if I'm going to be, put it in a friendly sort of manner, that would be what I have to say.
Where can people find you?
Just on my 1-month-old Twitter account. It's no, look, I'm not here to self-promote. I'm just here to have a chat. So
well, thank you for
don't worry
having
about
that. I do appreciate you being
no
here. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Brianna Wu, take it away.
If you care about these issues, you take them seriously, you read credible sources, you try to understand the history, you try to figure out where both sides are coming from, and you think about realistic ways to accomplish policies here. And I think it's really telling that we have a really clear threat at play, which is you've got a group of radicals are being funded by Iran, and they are threatening international shipping, and we're basically putting together a coalition to kill them. And the discussion just devolved into a lot of complaints against America with no real policy agenda there. It's respectfully a really unserious conversation.
Okay,
and
well,
I think if you
care, this is closing stuff. We'll get into call. Stop! We'll have call-ins. There'll be some back and forth. Then you can respond. Then finish up.
I think if you care about these issues, I think you need to take it seriously, and I think you need to find ways to bring your policy positions to bear. If you're really frustrated about the United States, I think one of the first things you could do, tankies could do generally, is approach this stuff a little bit more honestly. I think we saw techniques tonight like subbing the United States when it's actually Saudi Arabia conducting the war in Yemen. So I feel like there's this bait and switch that's constant, that it feels fundamentally dishonest for me. And Tankie, like you said, from talking to you in person, you're so different than your Twitter. I don't think you're a bad person. This has actually been really cordial. I think my objection to you is I don't think the tactics you're using for your worldview are going to bring you anywhere. I think it's going to cause a lot of chaos, which actually is kind of like the Houthis when you get to it. So there it is.
Okay, and with that, we got some callers. If you want to call in, !Discord and chat, and I'll put the link in YouTube too. You click that link, you accept the rules, you jump backstage, I pull you on, you have your say. We'll be brief, we'll be concise. I want to respect everyone's time. We won't take too much time on this. I see the super chats, we'll get to them. We don't need the callers in here for that. But let me bring on our first guest. Artemis, you're live.
1 second. So, can you hear me?
Yep. Your time to shine, buddy.
All right. So, I got a question for the tankie.
Hello.
Hey, so do you think the Houthis are the victims or the perpetrators in the scenario going on right now?
I think that sort of dichotomy is a little bit too, like that's just what's the word I'm looking for? Excuse me. Sorry, it's still quite early here.
Black and
I
white?
think that's reductionist is the word I
Okay.
was looking for.
Right.
Like as far as I mean,
Who have the
Look,
Houthis attacked?
this is.
Hold on.
this is a-
Hold on. Let's
Yeah,
make
Go.
let's make it a little bit easier. Of the shipping vessels that the Houthis have attacked at gunpoint, have those ships belong to any nation that has attacked the Houthis?
No, they haven't. But let me just
Okay.
so,
No.
so
Well, hold on. I'm just
Go on,
saying.
go on, yeah.
It's really easy.
but
So
that's reductionist.
hold
The
on.
reason that they are attacking
Hold-
those ships
Let
is
him
to
explain why it's
int-
reductionist. and then we
Okay,
can respond.
okay.
No, I'm
The
telling you.
reason-
Go ahead.
Go
Tankie.
ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the reason that the Houthis are they have imposed a blockade, which they in their territory, right? And they are simply enforcing a blockade. That is all they're doing. So I mean, the US, and again, sorry to be anti-US, but the US, they they took that Iranian oil tanker and stole the oil. So I mean, and they claimed that they were enforcing their sanctions in that situation. So I'm not sure how it's any different. Go ahead though, if you.
The Iranian sanctions are like almost a global sanction for the acts they've done while Iran has taken over other shipping vessels in the past. They are equally at fault for doing this on both sides. I don't know why you're bringing up Iran in this situation. Iran is one of the worst perpetrators of piracy when it comes to oil.
I'm simply drawing
It's a bad one. You shouldn't have done that.
Well, no, it's not at all.
The issue with Yemen.
Well,
The issue with Yemen.
Hold on.
The issue with Yemen.
Artemis, you gotta let him respond
Yeah,
to you. Though.
again,
Go ahead.
So the comparison I draw is that the US, they claim that was to enforce their sanctions. Now the Houthis have placed a blockade in that region, hence the reason that those ships are being, I suppose, attacked, if that's the word you want to use. But they're enforcing a blockade that they've placed in support of the Palestinian people. So, I mean, if the US then goes and attacks them, for something that the US has done themselves, then yes, they are the victims, actually, to make it clear. So, I mean, by all means, what do you have to say to that?
Okay, so what was the stated not requirements, but they are to blockade all vessels who are doing what?
Who are conducting trade that benefits the state of Israel.
Okay, of those vessels, how many?
Or the West? Sorry, yeah.
No.
Israel or their allies.
That second part was never stated. They specifically stated out any business done with the state of Israel was why they were blockading. Okay, of the ships that actually were attacked or taken over or wherever you want to define it, how many of those actually met that criteria?
Well, you're not including the part that incorporates the Western allies, which they did state.
You have to actually show that was stated. Because when they initially...
I mean, you want me to brief, like, right now? I don't have the source in hand.
Okay, hold on. So here's the issue, right? Where is Yemen located in a large enough state where the economic zone extends past the point where it would not interfere with another economic zone on territorial waters?
Sorry, can you say that a bit clearer?
So for example, where Yemen is situated in the strait, does its territorial waters and economic exclusion zone extend to the point where it interferes with another nation's international water? Economic exclusion zone.
I'm not sure. I don't know off the top of my head. Does it?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay.
It does. So you cannot enforce a blockade in somebody else's economic exclusion zone on the water. It is illegal.
Can do whatever they want.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. So we could do whatever we want.
I
Mike
mean,
makes
well,
right.
you are. That's the thing.
No.
That's the thing. You already
no.
do. You. I mean,
No, it's fine. We've already got it.
That's actually
you
not how
bombed Iraq.
international
You
law
bombed-
works.
Yeah,
That's
but you
actually
bombed
not.
Iraq 2 days. Oh, you want to talk about international law? The
Yep.
state of Israel is ignoring every international
here
law
we go.
on the planet.
It's the
The
Jews.
United
wait.
I
States.
knew it.
Oh, hey,
I
hold
knew
up,
it.
hold up.
Because it's
Hold up,
true. It's
Hold up,
true.
hold up.
No,
I'm gonna
because
agree.
like,
I'm gonna agree with Tanky
you
here.
don't like
Hold on. I'm gonna agree with
No,
Tanky
if-
here.
the
I'm gonna agree with you,
rules-based
Tanky.
order is essentially, the US makes the rules and orders everyone around. So if the US doesn't want to, doesn't want to comply by international law, then should anyone else? You don't get special privileges.
Okay.
I don't care.
Hold on.
Fuck the US.
Hold on. So I'm gonna agree with Tanky here. According to International Criminal Court, they probably would. Where Israel has violated a lot of international laws. Tanky, can you tell me, is Israel one of the signees of the ICC, of the International Criminal
No.
Court?
No,
Okay.
it is of the ICJ.
And what is that?
I think recently they agreed to, if I'm not mistaken, they agreed to hold a trial. South Africa has made some
Correct,
accusations against them in the
The-
ICJ
Yeah, that's through the ICJ.
specifically.
So it's a unilateral thing
Mhm.
that the South Africa, who has pulled out of the same court that they're trying to file in, no less than twice in the last.
It's a different one. ICJ, not ICC. They're two.
Hold on,
separate.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure the South
Artemis?
Africa pulled out of those.
Artemis,
Let me go look it up.
do you have anything else for the rest of the panel? For the rest?
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
Sure. The Tanky is going to always make America bad regardless because he's defending a system of government that caused massive death and suffering throughout the 20th century. There's nothing you can say to this man that's ever going to convince him that America's in the right. I don't know why you guys brought him on here, but
I mean, I literally
good
said that.
Well, we like to have
When asked, I actually gave an example of when the United States had done good. And you can say World War II, it was a while ago, but yeah, thanks for helping out at the end, I guess.
the entirety time of the Lend-Lease Act, where the Russia did not produce anything of its own, and only focused on building tanks.
Artemis?
Russia?
Artemis?
Yeah, the Soviet Union.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you, buddy.
Good chat.
He had it all bottled up. It all had to come
I
out.
know. Okay. Does anyone else in my audience have some questions for Brianna, for Noah, even for Mr. Tanky here? Now's your time to shine, gang. Look, you're always yelling at me after the show about, oh, why didn't you go after them about this or that or the other thing they've said? Well, now is your chance. So come on, get in backstage, jump on, have a chat. We'll have a talk. I am curious. Do you think, since we're here and since we're waiting, Mr. Tanky, one of the things post World War II, I think that the U.S. did that was phenomenal was its intervention in the Korean War. I think that by intervening in the Korean War, we saved, in a very real way, South Korea from the fate currently being experienced by millions of North Koreans right now. What are your thoughts?
Certainly. So the Korean War, which there was no such thing as North and South Korea. I'm sure you're aware, but and that sort of divide was something that was entirely a US concept. It was agreed to by the Soviet Union. Just so I'll be honest. Now, as far as what happened there, you had Sigmund Rhee, and then the likes of MacArthur, and then also, like people like 𝕵𝖎𝖙, what's his name? Curtis LeMay. So that was a military junta that had absolutely no support from the people in the South there. The people in the South and the North wanted unification, and they, and whether or not it would have been communist doesn't, that's irrelevant at the end of the day. What they wanted.
That's not true. That's not correct.
What?
Didn't
Do you think? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether or not they wanted communism or not. What I'm saying is they wanted unification. Sigmund Rhee was incredibly unpopular. He was despised. He was a dictator.
I wanna.
No one in South Korea wanted to be ruled by the People in South Korea didn't want to be
I'm
ruled
not
by the
saying
communist regime in the North.
I'm not
They didn't
saying
want
that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they did. What they wanted was a unification, and they certainly didn't want Sigmund-Rhee, and that is why the North
They
invaded.
didn't want
It was a
unification under. They fought very hard against the communists. They did not want reunification under a communist government. They didn't want
Are you
that.
talking about prior
South
to
Korean.
the Korean
I'm talking
War?
about during the Korean War. I'm talking about during the Korean War. They did
Well,
not.
during
They fought very hard. They fought very
Yeah,
hard.
during
The whole country
I'm
fought
saying
very hard
before.
to avoid being conquered by North Korea. They fought really
Well,
hard.
it wasn't. I mean, they didn't. So something that's really telling when it comes to the Korean War. If you look at
Syngman Rhee was not a
the
great leader, but the people of South Korea strongly did not want to be conquered by North Korea.
so
And
when
they joined the army
when the
en
North
masse and fought really hard.
when the North, when they, I suppose, invaded Seoul, they didn't destroy the infrastructure. Then now compare that to what the coalition from the South did in the North. It is horrendous. They destroyed nearly all infrastructure. Killed something like to the tune of 3 million people. I mean, the people flying the bomber jets were literally saying back to base, there's nothing left to bomb. I mean, that is truly horrendous, and I don't know how in good faith that can be painted in a positive light. That would be my thoughts on the matter.
Okay. Well, gang, it's been fun. It's been great. We're going to end it now. Next week, we got some great shows coming up for you. On Tuesday, we're going to have Short Fat Otaku on. He's going to be co-hosting my call-in show, so that'll be fun.
Oh, that's so much fun.
Yeah.
I'll call into that.
Yeah,
What
that'll
day
be
You have
is
the
great.
that?
greatest guest names: Short Fat Otaku, TankieCharacteristics.
Look,
My name is just Noah. I'm boring.
you got to step it up. There's still time. You can rebrand. My original name
Rabbit
was not
Lord.
Wick. You could.
Right, TankieCharacteristics. Let's make an agreement. Let's put aside our differences and agree that the real threat is Australia.
Yeah.
I hate Australia. I mean, land back in Australia is that should be, it should be Mao-esque, to be honest.
Okay.
But yes, we can agree on that. And look, just quickly, at the end of the day, just because I have very strong feelings towards the state apparatus of the United States and the Western regimes, I just really want to make it clear that I do not have anything against the people of the United States. I stand in solidarity with the working class, and I want the best for the world, including the people of the US. But
Your
as
Twitter repeatedly casually calls for violence. I'm sorry, that does not have credibility, man.
When have I ever called for
All
violence
kinds
against
of
the US
jokes
people?
about beating people up and all kinds of
That's
stuff.
not true.
So,
You're misrepresenting me.
all right.
Brianna, who?
Here's what I have to say. The United States is going to invest a lot in Indonesia, and we are going to promote Indonesian
I just think
growth.
it's wild. I tried to extend an olive branch, and Brianna who here is just like, oh, you want to beat up Americans? Like, God, just such a bad faith.
Okay. Well, what a great note to end on before
for your
this
time.
descends into chaos even further. We're gonna rate out until I'm really important. Wave bye-bye, people. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Left to America.